The Golden Cage. The Metropolitan Grand Hotel's crystal ballroom sparkled like a jeweled music box, but Victoria Blackwood felt trapped inside its glittering walls. She adjusted the emerald silk of her evening gown, a shade chosen to complement her auburn hair and green eyes, details her husband Marcus had once noticed but now seemed to overlook entirely. From her seat at the head table, Victoria watched Marcus work the crowd with his trademark charisma. As founder of Blackwood Technologies, he commanded respect from senators, celebrities, and business titans alike. His company's revolutionary artificial intelligence software had made them billionaires, transforming their lives from a modest Oakland apartment to this world of private jets and charity galas. Tonight's event benefited the Children's Hospital Foundation, a cause close to Victoria's heart since their own struggle with infertility. She had designed the hospital's new wing pro bono, pouring her passion into creating healing spaces. Yet Marcus took credit even for her charitable work, introducing her contributions as inspired by my wife's feminine touch. The distance between them had grown imperceptibly, like a crack in a foundation. Late nights at the office became weekends away. Business trips multiplied. Marcus's phone buzzed constantly with messages he'd never share, calls he'd take in private. Victoria, busy with her architectural firm and believing in their 20-year marriage, had attributed it to business pressures. "Quite the power couple," murmured Helena Cross, wife of a prominent judge, settling beside Victoria. Her tone carried an edge. "Though I notice Marcus has been mentoring that brilliant young woman quite extensively." Victoria followed Helena's gaze to a striking brunette near the silent auction display. Natasha Sterling, Marcus's head of AI development, commanded attention in a backless black dress that screamed confidence rather than elegance. She was everything Victoria wasn't, 28 to Victoria's 42, unmarried, hungry with ambition that bordered on ruthless. Victoria had hired Natasha herself 2 years ago, impressed by her MIT credentials and innovative approach to machine learning. Marcus had taken a special interest in developing her potential, fast-tracking her to a senior position that had raised eyebrows throughout the company. "She's very talented," Victoria replied diplomatically, though unease prickled her spine. "I'm sure she is." Helena's voice dripped with implication, though I wonder what exactly she's been developing in those private strategy sessions. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus approached their table with Natasha in tow. His hand rested, possessively, on the small of the younger woman's back, a gesture so casual yet intimate that Victoria's breath caught. "Darling," Marcus beamed at Victoria with his practiced smile. "Natasha was just telling me about the breakthrough with the new client algorithm. Revolutionary work, really. She's been putting in incredible hours." Natasha's smile was razor-sharp. "Victoria, you look absolutely radiant tonight. That dress is stunning on you." The compliment felt like a blade wrapped in silk. "Thank you," Victoria managed, studying the woman who had somehow invaded every corner of her husband's professional life. "Marcus speaks of your work constantly." "I'm passionate about innovation," Natasha replied, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "I believe in pushing boundaries, exploring new territories." The double meaning wasn't lost on Victoria. She watched Marcus's pupils dilate slightly, saw the flush creep up his neck. 20 years of marriage had taught her to read his tells. As the couple moved away to greet other guests, Victoria noticed something that made her blood freeze. Natasha wore a delicate diamond bracelet, the exact one Victoria had admired in Tiffany's window last month, the one Marcus had dismissed as too flashy when she'd mentioned wanting it for their anniversary. The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. This wasn't just an affair. This was replacement. Victoria excused herself and walked to the ladies' lounge, her architectural mind already calculating angles and structural weaknesses. In the mirror, she saw not a discarded wife, but a woman who had designed her own life, with precision and care. If Marcus wanted to demolish their marriage, she would show him what happened when you underestimated the architect. The digital trail, Natasha Sterling, had always believed that success belonged to those bold enough to seize it. Growing up in a cramped Boston apartment with a single mother who cleaned offices, she'd learned early that waiting for opportunities was a luxury she couldn't afford. The affair with Marcus had begun 18 months ago during a late-night strategy session. She'd been presenting her revolutionary AI algorithm when he'd leaned close, ostensibly to examine her code, but she'd felt the electricity between them. By midnight, they were in his private office, and by dawn, she was no longer just his employee. But Natasha was too smart to be merely a mistress. While Marcus showered her with expensive gifts and promises of a future together, she was building her own insurance policy. The beauty of artificial intelligence, she'd told him during one of their clandestine meetings, is that it can create patterns that appear completely legitimate to human auditors. Marcus had been intrigued, especially when she'd shown him how they could redirect development funds through shell companies she'd established. Project Prometheus, named after the Titan who stole fire from the gods, was her masterpiece. On paper, it was cutting-edge AI research requiring massive investment. In reality, it was an elaborate money-laundering scheme, funneling millions into offshore accounts. Natasha had studied Victoria Blackwood carefully, learning her routines, her blind spots. The older woman was brilliant but trusting, focused on her architectural projects while her husband built his empire. Victoria attended board meetings, but rarely questioned the technical details Natasha presented with polished confidence. The algorithm requires continuous refinement, Natasha would explain, her presentations filled with complex charts and projections. We're essentially teaching machines to think creatively, which demands substantial computational resources. The board, intimidated by the technical jargon, approved budget after budget. What they didn't know was that computational resources meant luxury cars, designer jewelry, and a penthouse apartment Marcus had purchased for their meetings. Natasha had convinced him they were building toward a future together, one where they'd disappear with enough money to start fresh in a country without extradition treaties. She'd chosen tonight's charity gala carefully. The public humiliation of Victoria would serve multiple purposes. It would force Marcus to choose sides definitively, and it would provide the perfect distraction while their final transfer, $12 million, completed its journey to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Marcus was supposed to announce their relationship subtly, professionally. Instead, he'd become drunk on his own power, parading her around like a trophy. Natasha felt a flicker of unease watching Victoria's composed reaction. She'd expected tears, dramatic confrontation, maybe even a slap. This glacial calm was unsettling. During Marcus's speech, Natasha noticed Victoria's absence from the head table. A scan of the ballroom revealed nothing, but instinct prickled at her spine. Where was the scorned wife? Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from their Cayman contact. Transfer complete, funds secured. Perfect timing. Tomorrow, she and Marcus would fly to Switzerland for a business conference that would actually be their escape. She'd been planning this exit strategy for months, even as she'd fallen deeper into the intoxicating game of corporate theft. But as Marcus finished his speech and extended his hand for their planned dance, Natasha caught sight of Victoria ascending the stage steps. The older woman moved with purpose, her emerald dress catching the spotlight like armor. Panic shot through Natasha's chest. Victoria held something small and metallic, a USB drive. Impossible. Their files were encrypted, password protected, accessible only through biometric scanners. Yet, as Victoria's voice cut through the ballroom's stunned silence, naming Project Prometheus, with chilling accuracy, Natasha realized her fatal error. She'd underestimated the woman who'd built Blackwood Technologies' foundation, who'd designed its security protocols, who'd had administrative access to every system from day one. Victoria hadn't been absent from their plotting. She'd been gathering evidence. Part 3. The Perfect Storm. Marcus Blackwood stood frozen on the dance floor, watching his carefully constructed world crumble in real time. For 20 years he'd been the master manipulator, the charming CEO who could talk his way out of any crisis. But the woman at the microphone wasn't the submissive wife he'd taken for granted. She was the brilliant architect he'd forgotten he'd married. His mind raced through damage control strategies, but Victoria's methodical destruction of his reputation was surgical in its precision. She wasn't ranting like a hysteric. She was presenting evidence like the forensic architect she'd trained to be, building her case brick by devastating brick. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria continued, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's acoustic perfection, "I have documentation of every fraudulent transaction, every falsified report, every stolen dollar. But more importantly, I have something else." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. What else could she possibly have? Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "I have the recordings." His blood turned to ice. She couldn't possibly mean, "You see, when you're married to a paranoid tech mogul, your home tends to be extensively monitored. Security cameras, audio surveillance, digital assistants recording every conversation. Marcus installed these systems to protect us from corporate espionage." Her laugh was musical and terrifying. He never considered that they might protect against domestic threats. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Marcus saw board members pulling out phones, investors whispering urgently to their assistants. His world was collapsing in high definition, broadcast live to everyone who mattered. "The recordings document 18 months of planning," Victoria continued relentlessly. "Strategy sessions where my husband and Ms. Sterling discussed their theft, their affair, and their escape plan, including tonight's timeline. The final transfer was scheduled to complete during this very gala." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Victoria, please, think about what you're doing. Think about us, about our life together." "Our life?" Victoria's eyebrows rose. "You mean the life where you erased my contributions to our company? Where you stole credit for my innovations while stealing money with your mistress? That life?" She turned back to the microphone. "I'd like to acknowledge someone special in our audience tonight. Detective Raymond Walsh of the Financial Crimes Division is here as a guest of the mayor. Detective Walsh, I believe you'll find this evidence quite compelling for your ongoing investigation into corporate embezzlement in the tech sector." Marcus's knees nearly buckled. They'd been under investigation. For how long? His eyes found Detective Walsh, rising from a table near the back, his expression grim but unsurprised. Natasha grabbed Marcus's arm, her nails digging into his jacket. "We need to leave. Now, the plane—" "There is no plane." Victoria's voice cut through their whispered panic. "I took the liberty of cancelling your Swiss reservations. I also contacted your Cayman banker. Interesting man, very cooperative when presented with evidence of money laundering. Your accounts have been frozen pending investigation. The trap was perfect, absolute." Marcus felt like a mouse in a maze, discovering that every exit had been sealed while he'd been gorging himself on cheese. 20 years, Victoria said, her voice softening slightly. 20 years I stood beside you, believed in you, built with you. I gave you my love, my loyalty, my brilliant mind. And you took all of it and used it to commit crimes against the very people who trusted us. She held up the USB drive again. This contains enough evidence to ensure both of you spend considerable time contemplating your choices. But mostly, it contains something more valuable than money. It contains justice, Marcus saw his future crystallizing: handcuffs, headlines, prison. Everything he'd built, destroyed by the woman he'd dismissed as furniture in his own life. As police officers began making their way through the crowd, Marcus realized the most devastating truth of all. Victoria Blackwood had always been the smarter of the two. He'd just been too arrogant to notice. The reckoning Detective Raymond Walsh had attended the charity gala, expecting a routine evening of networking and mediocre chicken dinner. As a 20-year veteran of financial crimes investigation, he'd learned that the biggest frauds often hid behind the most respectable facades. Still, he hadn't expected his case to solve itself quite so spectacularly. He'd been tracking suspicious patterns in tech sector investments for months. Shell companies, inflated R&D budgets, funds disappearing into complex offshore structures. Blackwood Technologies had appeared on his radar repeatedly, but their books seemed clean, their reputation spotless. Now he understood why. The architect of their success was also the architect of their downfall. As Victoria Blackwood methodically dismantled her husband's empire from the stage, Walsh was already coordinating with his team via discreet text messages. Units were positioned outside, financial analysts were pulling records, and federal prosecutors were being briefed in real time. "The beauty of justice," Victoria continued, her voice carrying over the chaos, "is that it's structural. Like a building, it must be built on a solid foundation of truth. Tonight, we're demolishing a structure built on lies." Walsh watched Marcus and Natasha Sterling with professional interest. The husband displayed classic signs of a cornered narcissist: denial, rage, desperate attempts at manipulation. The younger woman was calculating, already looking for exit strategies that no longer existed. "Mrs. Blackwood," Walsh called out, rising from his seat. His voice carried the authority of 2 decades in law enforcement. "I believe we should discuss that evidence in a more official capacity." Victoria nodded gracefully. "Detective Walsh, I've prepared comprehensive documentation for your review. Financial records, audio recordings, correspondence, and digital forensics from our company servers. Everything is organized chronologically with supporting analysis." Even in her moment of personal devastation, she remained the methodical architect. Walsh felt a grudging admiration for her thoroughness. "You can't trust her," Marcus shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. "She's my wife. This is privileged communication. She's having a breakdown." Actually, Victoria's smile was razor thin. Spousal privilege doesn't apply when one spouse is reporting the other's crimes, especially when those crimes were committed against third parties. She gestured to the room full of investors and clients. "Besides, I filed for divorce this morning. The papers were served to your office at 5 p.m. The timing was perfect, calculated to prevent any legal maneuvering." Walsh made a mental note to recommend Victoria for a career in law enforcement if architecture ever lost its appeal. Natasha finally found her voice, though it trembled with barely controlled panic. "This is entrapment. We're being set up." "No, Miss Sterling," Walsh replied calmly. "This is consequences. The money trails we've been tracking lead directly to accounts under your control. The algorithm you claim to develop, our tech experts determined it's largely plagiarized from open-source projects, with minor modifications to hide fraudulent transactions." The net was tightening, and everyone in the room could see it. Walsh's backup officers were now visible, positioned strategically around the ballroom's exits. "Marcus Blackwood, Natasha Sterling," Walsh announced formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and violation of fiduciary duty." As handcuffs clicked into place, Marcus made one last desperate appeal to his wife. "Victoria, please, we can work this out. Think about our reputation, our friends." Victoria stepped down from the stage with regal composure. "Our reputation?" she asked quietly. Marcus, you destroyed our reputation the moment you chose theft over integrity. Our friends. She gestured to the room of shocked faces. These people trusted us with their money, their security, their faith. You betrayed all of them. She handed the USB drive to Detective Walsh. Everything you need is there. I've also prepared a full statement and will cooperate completely with your investigation. As the arrests proceeded, Victoria Blackwood stood in the wreckage of her former life. Emerald dress pristine, spine straight, dignity intact. She'd lost a marriage, but she'd saved her soul. Detective Walsh pocketed the evidence, knowing it would be the foundation of one of the strongest financial crime cases he'd ever built. Sometimes justice came from the most unexpected architects. Part 5. The Architect's Blueprint. 6 months later, Victoria Blackwood stood in the bright, airy offices of Phoenix Design Group, her new architectural firm. Sunlight streamed through, floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the drafting tables where her small but brilliant team worked on projects that fed her soul rather than her bank account. The federal trial had concluded 3 weeks earlier. Marcus received 12 years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. Natasha Sterling, who'd attempted to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, still received 8 years after it was revealed she'd been planning to disappear with the stolen funds, regardless of Marcus's fate. Victoria had testified with the same methodical precision she'd displayed that night at the gala. The prosecution had called her the perfect witness, unshakable, thorough, and devastatingly credible. Defense attorneys had tried to paint her as a vengeful ex-wife, but the evidence spoke louder than their desperate narratives. The divorce settlement had been surprisingly straightforward. With Marcus's assets frozen and most of their wealth proven to be stolen, Victoria had claimed only what was legitimately hers. The architectural patents she'd developed, the designs Marcus had taken credit for, and enough liquid assets to start. Fresh, Victoria. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly on the office door. Your 2 p.m. appointment is here, the Children's Hospital Expansion Project? Victoria smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd felt in months. Send them in. Dr. Patricia Reeves entered with a small team from Metropolitan Children's Hospital, the same institution she'd designed the wing for 3 years earlier. But this time, Victoria's name would be on the blueprints, her vision uncompromised by Marcus's ego or corporate politics. Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Reeves began, then paused. I'm sorry, Miss Blackwood now, isn't it? Victoria is fine, she replied warmly. And yes, I've reclaimed my maiden name. Victoria Phoenix seemed appropriate for the circumstances. They spent 2 hours discussing the expansion, a state-of-the-art pediatric cancer ward designed with healing gardens, therapeutic play spaces, and innovative lighting systems to maximize patient comfort. Victoria's previous work had demonstrated her understanding of how architecture could support recovery, and the hospital board wanted her vision for their most ambitious project yet. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Reeves lingered behind. Victoria, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to say, what you did took incredible courage. You could have remained silent, kept your comfortable life. Victoria gazed out at the city skyline she was helping reshape, one ethical building at a time. Comfortable, she considered the word. I was living in a beautiful cage, complicit in crimes I didn't know were being committed in my name. That's not comfort, that's cowardice. After the hospital team left, Victoria remained at her desk, reviewing the preliminary sketches for the pediatric ward. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helena Cross, the judge's wife, who'd first opened her eyes at the gala. Saw the hospital announcement in the paper. Proud of you. Coffee soon. Victoria smiled, adding the message to a growing collection from friends who'd supported her through the legal proceedings and social aftermath. Some relationships hadn't survived. Couples who'd profited from association with Marcus had quietly distanced themselves. But authentic friendships had emerged from the wreckage, built on respect rather than wealth. Her computer chimed with an email notification. The sender made her pause. Detective Walsh. Victoria, thought you'd want to know. We've recovered 87% of the stolen funds. Victim compensation should begin next quarter. Also, your forensic work has become a case study at the FBI Academy. If you ever consider a career change, financial crimes could use someone with your analytical skills. Congratulations on the hospital project. Best regards, Ray. Victoria laughed, a sound she'd almost forgotten how to make during her marriage. Law enforcement wasn't in her plans, but it was gratifying to know her meticulous documentation had become a teaching tool. As evening approached, she gathered her blueprints and prepared to leave. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities to build something honest and lasting. She'd designed a new life for herself from the ground up, and unlike Marcus's empire of lies, this foundation would endure. Walking to her car, Victoria Phoenix, architect, survivor, and architect of justice, felt lighter than she had in 20 years. She'd learned that sometimes the most beautiful structures could only rise after tearing down what came before. The woman who'd once been trapped in a golden cage had built herself wings instead.